like you mentioning 5 amino 1 MQ to me. I didn't really I seen it in the catalogs, but I was like, I don't even know what this is. But then I heard you talking how it was beneficial for you, and I was like, oh, I gotta learn more about this thing. What is this?
Yeah, well,
Cause I'm
you know, this is where if you stick with the learning process, you stick with it long enough. I'm talking about like the stuff that we talk about at our academy that you participate in on a regular basis because it's not easy. You know, it, the language is that of a laboratory scientist, and it requires a lot of rote memory of terms that don't relate to a whole lot, and they also, scientific studies are not easy to interpret at the same time. But here's my point. But you stick with it, and suddenly something will snap into place. Okay, and that's what happened with 5 amino 1 MQ, because I had already known about it since 2019,
Hmm.
but I didn't really understand the mechanism of action. It was presented to me in the private. I was part of a mastermind group, and you know, and the the doctor that was sort of one of the pioneers in peptide sciences, however you want to call it, was really excited about it. Okay, he was a bodybuilder. Um, I mean, he was a fitness guy. You could tell that he's the kind of guy that works out. Like a real athlete. He was also a surgeon. Yeah,
Oh,
he is, right.
a surgeon
Yeah,
too. Oh.
he's a surgeon and fitness guru, and he was a little bit older. I mean, but that's the whole point. I mean, of anti-aging is to stay strong and fit and healthy, even into 50s, 60s. I mean, why not? I mean, that's the other thing is why should I just shrivel up and turn into an exoskeleton and be in chronic pain? I mean, come on, like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But Yeah, he was into the mechanisms of action, but it's too much to consume when you haven't put in the time and energy. And so the algorithm was there, and I had tried it, but I didn't know what to expect. And it's kind of put out there as a weight loss drug. And some of the office girls, they tried it, but they were expecting kind of like what semaglutide does for people now. And this was clearly different. And then it got taken away for whatever reason. Probably, who knows, maybe it was too good. Okay, sometimes that's the case in my imagination. Okay. Because I'm not there. I'm not there on politically. I mean, I don't know who's doing what and for what. And but sometimes there's good things that are great, and that's why we don't have it the way I see it. And it wasn't until I started to wrap my head around methylation pathways, those pathways where molecules are passing on a carbon group. Okay, so we're talking that the assembly line, you could say, more deep within the cytoplasm of the cell. Okay, not phosphorylation anymore. Now we're dealing with carbon, and the carbon process that leads to the activation of genes, and also the activation of longevity genes. And that's where NAD plus enters the picture. Well, with COVID, if you understand what's going on, you'll see that the perpetual oxidative stress that it causes leads to an NAD plus deficit, because NAD plus, well, just know, obviously it's the first step of the electron transport chain, where the mitochondria produces its most powerful and most abundant energy currency, which is ATP. And you can kind of see NAD plus as a currency because, you know, if you don't have any NAD plus or NADH, which is really the same thing, just again, it's getting rid of sharing an electron, or splitting an electron from an atom, from a proton. Really, that's what it's doing. When you think about that's another level of energy of production, is you're at the electron level of passing on. Okay, and just like a battery, you're tearing apart an atom, like a hydrogen atom, into an electron and a proton, and it funnels into through a wall, producing a gradient. Well, that's what a battery is. You've got negative charges on one side and you've got positive charges on the other. That's a potential. And then that energy, when you allow it to come together in an organized way, creates the energy that produces ATP. And ATP is required. It literally is like paper money. I mean, it's like the dollar. It can be used, or maybe we can call it cryptocurrency. It can be used for anything, for immediate energy and immediate withdrawal. NAD plus is probably more like a stock or something, you know, because you can't really produce energy immediately with it, but it leads to energy. And I just now came up with that. And you'll see, you will be able to relate how a cell works to real life, because the very same processes are happening. In fact, all of the organelles of a cell are all directly related to the organs in your body. Yeah. I mean, it's really, you know, that's the kind of deep understanding where it's in you now. But the oxidative stress causes a lot of damage to the DNA. The way that I've translated it from the literature. And when that happens, the DNA, in order to activate an enzyme that can help fix DNA breaks or help to fix the damage, requires NAD plus. And so NAD plus ends up getting utilized for DNA repair. And so the mitochondria then has to switch. Just imagine it switching from oxidative phosphorylation, which is the actual production of that's what you would call the production of ATP via the electron transport chain. That's one way that's like the gasoline engine, and glycolysis has to switch to glycolysis, which is kind of like the electric engine, like the electric car version of producing energy. It's not quite as efficient. I mean, it's efficient, but it's not as powerful. Mm-hmm. And so what did people have during COVID? They were lethargic, or they were fatigued. Mm-hmm. Well, because their cellular engines switched into the electric version of the electric car version of producing energy. Not quite as fast, because the NAD plus is being siphoned off. The problem is, and also COVID has a way of hijacking the machinery of methylation for its own purposes and its own replication. and those with methylation issues, they have a weak ability to sort of grease the wheels of methylation, and so their machinery of methylation can break down really easily. If one wheel stops like a grandfather clock, the other wheels will stop, or if one slows down, the other one slow down, and the end products of that process lead to very important molecules that can activate and turn on genes. So NAD plus has a way to recycle itself. As it's being used up, it's being broken down into its components, like nicotinic acid and NMN, which is nicotinamide mononucleoside. I believe sometimes I still screw up the names. It has a pathway that allows it to reconstruct itself, but something happens when the engine, when our system gets taken over for a long enough time, or we're older, is that there's an enzyme that gets expressed. It may even be overexpressed, unnaturally expressed, because what's happening is an unnatural process. We have a virus hijacking our system. And when that happens, not only does a cell have difficulty getting rid of that virus, because it requires energy to get rid of the virus through autophagy, or to neutralize it if it's like a toxin, and the genes that control that turn off for the most part. Just see it like that. Those are those longevity genes, those Sirtuin genes. Okay. So again, we've got the salvage pathway for NAD plus, and that gets sort of shut down because there's an enzyme that turns on and siphons those parts to recreate NAD plus. Basically stops that production line, and you sort of lose. It's like they just spill out. Just imagine all those components. Some of those components spill out, and so you don't even have the ability to produce sufficient amounts of NAD plus. And perhaps maybe it's the cell saying, we're going to shut this. We're going to shut this whole factory down. We're low energy. Like the cell phone goes into low energy mode, right? Yeah, it's only the screen gets dim. Now, the problem is if that goes on long enough, I think you stay like that. You're done. The lever goes off, the energy production turns off, and it stays off. And nothing, well, at least in this particular scenario, and that's why people have post-COVID fatigue for forever, seemingly, right? And then the virus just kind of hangs out and keeps replicating and passes on, especially in the nervous system, from one nerve to the next.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, really sad. And then you have the inflammation overactivated, and that leads to the autoimmune diseases and neuroinflammation and other horrible diseases that I don't want to have.
No.
Right. So, so the epiphany came, and my issue was I was weak physically. I mean, I had brain fog. I could hack all that stuff with various peptides. You saw me; I still look like I'm talking like this, and going into the science and stuff. But it took. I mean, we're talking like, I've got shelves of some of the best stuff out there, very targeted therapies. But why was there's something? I couldn't get past a certain sticking point. Well, why was that? There was an enzyme that was overexpressed that was blocking my salvage pathway for NAD plus. All right. And that's when the big aha came, because I had saw 5-amino 1-MQ at one of the compounding pharmacies. Like, oh, hey, I know that one. And I was like, wait a minute. NAD plus is required to turn on sirtuin genes. The sirtuin genes will turn back. Well, first of all, you need the NAD plus for the oxidative phosphoryl or for the electron transport chain and production of ATP. Get the turn on the gasoline engine. You need to be able to flip on autophagy so that you can start to break down some of these, some of these proteins that are inactivated from oxidative stress, or maybe the virus is maybe it's hijacking autophagy as well. And so it takes energy to be able to every car has an exhaust system. You got to get rid of the bad stuff. And the virus, you can't get rid of it if you can't you got to break it down and send it through the tailpipe. All right. So it was difficult for me to explain all that on our call, the conference call, because there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of deep understanding in order to get from, here to here, tie mitochondria, NAD plus, sirtuin genes, PARP, which is repairing the enzyme that's repairing the DNA, which is utilizing, siphoning, sucking up all the NAD plus. The virus even has something that breaks down the PARP hydrolase. Sometimes I can't even remember. It's like PARP stands for like polyribose. It's not coming to me, and it's okay. I can't think of it. It's okay. I can't. You can admit that these are hard words to remember. But the virus has a hydrolase that breaks down this polyribose, whatever. That'll come to me.
PARP.
Maybe by the end. PARP, exactly. And so you keep having to build more, create more PARP out of NAD plus. Okay, well, that's another thing. You have to try and buffer the redox, okay, the oxidative stress. And that's why you want to work on angiotensin 2 and stop that from overexpressing the angiotensin angiotensin 2 type 1 receptor, which is triggering the NOx enzyme, which is triggering the oxidative stress or the superoxide that is leading to the DNA damage. Mm-hmm. Okay. So zooming back in, that's when I'm like, wait a minute. What if I gave myself NMN? Because that one, I may need some of that because it looks like I'm losing all of my NAD plus parts, and that one actually gets into the cell. NAD plus doesn't get into the cell. That's why you need a salvage pathway. You need the parts. You need the NMN. You need the niacin. You need the nicotinamide. It's really the niacin, but really the most efficient way, and you don't get a flush, is the NMN. Yeah. That's why I said NMN is required. That will help fuel the salvage. That's one of the major components of the salvage pathway. And then if you suppress and turn off that enzyme, the other parts will stop being siphoned off, and they will create NMN as well. And then you'll get this other end product back, which is called SAM or SAMe, or S-adenosyl methyltransferase, which is a major methylator that COVID steals. And so you get that back, and that can start turning on other things within the methylation pathways and activating genes. And I still have some blind spots in there, exactly what it is. I just know it's important. And then your NAD plus levels go up, which then activates those sirtuin genes, sirtuin 1 in particular, or SIRT1, that flips the switch on AMPK, just like you talked about rapamycin earlier. I mean, you've got this yin yang between AMPK and mTOR, okay, and that flips the switch on the mitochondria. You've got the NAD plus to produce the energy. The mitochondria is able to replicate itself. So you have one engine, two engines, four engines. Okay, think about the power that you have. You're turning on autophagy. You're spitting out getting rid of the junk and the unraveled inactive proteins. Breaking down the virus, saying, "Finally, I got you." Getting rid of that, and the sirtuin genes also modulate the calling of inflammation, the cytokines, the chemokines, the interleukin-6, the interleukin-1 beta, all the things that are polarizing the immune system in the wrong direction, like we've learned. And also activating, we also have this mast cell activation that's going on. It's a whole nother thing that's simultaneously happening. And all of a sudden, my power came back. And within 5 days, I was able to run from 4 miles and getting short of breath. 4 blocks and getting short of breath, to very quickly within a couple weeks running 4 miles straight, which was just, it was incredible. A lot of my aches and pains, started to dissipate. My muscles grew back, and then that's why I was so, I had, we try not to bring emotion into science. We just want to make sure the facts line up. We're not salesy, we're not, it's not received well. We're not trying to trigger emotions. Hey, now you want to get this thing. I was just saying, look, this was my experience. And of all the reasons why, this is the mechanism of action that makes the most sense. Here's the algorithm. Here's the connection between this and this. We know that NAD plus is required for cert genes. I believe they do turn off. They do turn off with age. And I think they turn off with chronic disease. And so you've got to flip a switch, man. You've got to turn something on. And that's why the other approaches didn't work. They were still the best of the best. I think at the ultimate level, you got to flip genes back on. And that's what it felt like. It felt like something flipped back on. That's the deep, profound. That's the profound experience that I had, and that one will stay with me for life, because I honestly, man, I didn't know if I was ever going to come out of it. Okay, now there's always another level. There's still I still have sensitivity to electromagnetic frequency. I clearly have mast cell activation syndrome. I still get brain fog, but there's always another level. That's why I brought up the idea of, our brains need to detoxify at night. And if there could be mild sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, that is not allowing us to sleep, get enough delta wave sleep in order for the lymphatics or the lymphatic system of the brain to clean itself at night. And that's something I'm working on as well, that we may need to have optimal, perfect sleep in order to clear the junk that we're dealing with in this day and age. But that's we can talk about that next time.
Now, have you started applying 5-amino 1-MQ clinically in your practice?
Yes. So here's the deal. With every great, aha comes the well, why didn't it work for this guy? Okay. And the best way to describe it is, if somebody has, the one thing I didn't mention and I didn't even think about for some reason, is at the time I started it, I also had given myself a shot of Kenalog. Okay.
The pain.
For inflammation.
Okay.
Okay, now think about this. And this actually makes a lot of sense. So what if you turn on the engine? Okay, what if you're dealing somebody who has a lot of inflammation, they have a lot of fatigue, and you say, I bet their salvage pathway is blocked. Let's give them the magic pill, let's do it. And give them some NMN. Well, what I think was happening with some people is that they had so much inflammation, and I had suppressed it at the same time, because I took it at the same time. I took a shot of Kenalog, which is a corticosteroid which drastically can bring down inflammation. I had to do something, man. I was just not. I had a lot to do. I had to pack up. I had to travel, and sometimes you wake up in a state of, I don't know if I can do this. Just give me the good stuff. So what I think happened is, and what's happening with people where it's not working is in these particular situations is that you rev up the engine, but you don't address the inflammation. So it's like your car is
Overheating.
It's overheating. Yeah, it overheats. Exactly. There's too much inflammation. Even though you turned on flip the gear, turned it back on to the gasoline engine, put it into turbo, and you're flying down the road and with parts rattling and the overheating button goes on, and suddenly it just slows right back down, and you're pushing the gas pedal and wondering what's going on, and smoke's coming out of the engine. Because I had some people that their heart would start to they get a little bit of tachycardia. Now these are very, very, very sick people.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, I had to sort of back off on it with those people. And these were people I couldn't just give them a shot of Kenalog either.
No.
Okay, that was my thing. I mean, they were in different states, and these are people I've got long-standing relationships with, and that's kind of how our practice works. Is it's really personalized medicine is if we're treating our friends and family.
Yeah. Now,
right?
The one thing I found clinically, because I haven't used 5-amino-1-MQ, but I've used NAD, and I've done NAD injections for people. They need trimethylglycine. They need this methyl donor. And it has something to do with the PARP pathways. I read it a long time ago, but you should try looking at TMG for these people who aren't doing so well, who are getting, I find one guy, he was doing NAD shots and he was on the ground spasmed. His muscles were all like cramped up. And I was like, well, were you taking TMG? He was like, nope, wasn't taking TMG. Give him TMG, he's a lot better. And so look into this one. You'll like it.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad to get your feedback. You being, and I didn't give you your justice early on because we got right into it, but you being a professional tennis player and training professional athletes, that's my understame. I mean,
I treat all populations. All populations come to me, but yeah, I look at it from athletic performance too. But they deal with the same things you do, like chronic fatigue patients and so forth. And some people come to me with some pretty severe illnesses. And back when I was working in the urgent cares early on in the pandemic, I developed kind of a treatment protocol for COVID, and it included a lot of these things that we talked about. I was talking about NMN, or nicotinamide mononucleotide, or NMR, using in patients, N-acetylcysteine, glutathione, all these nutraceuticals. But I was using the NAD precursors pretty early on because I think they were very helpful in the chronic fatigue component, but also the COVID, it burns through NAD a lot more. And then the patients who suffer more with COVID, they have low NAD reserves in the first place, right? So it came first, the COVID or the low NAD reserves?
Well, you have to think in my opinion, I don't know where these NAD plus reserves are that you're referring to. I understand them in the context of intracellular NAD precursor molecules, in the context of the salvage pathway. But my understanding, and this was through one of the PhD NAD plus researchers, who couldn't find any clear evidence, really any evidence at all, that NAD plus was increasing intracellular NAD plus levels. I said, well, what's it doing then? Because I've done an NAD plus drip, and that was a major turnaround for me because of the way that I felt after it. I had the way I say it is, if you have you're in a bad place in life, or you're burned out, or you've had a traumatic experience and you can't sleep, something like that, do a 4-hour NAD plus drip, and you'll probably be able to turn things around. You'll probably get a good night's rest, and you'll feel calm and like you can handle whatever pressures are happening to you. That's how I felt. I mean, I wasn't in that bad of a place, but I was burned out, and it made a big difference. In fact, I didn't even I had lost my desire to have like that glass of wine at the end of a day. It was like I didn't want it. And I know that they use it for addictions.
For addiction, yeah.
Right. But he thinks, this scientist that I spoke to, and I looked at the literature and looked, and I couldn't find anything either. He thinks it's the NAD plus is acting more as a neurotransmitter in that context. Okay, but it's not increasing the intracellular NAD plus, and that's what's required for it's the gene activation. It's the gene activation that matters. You have to see NAD plus as a master regulator, not as it's not cash. It's a stock. Unless you can think of another word for it, you can't spend it like money. And so it's not like you take if you've ever injected, which I know you have, you've injected yourself with NAD plus, and you certainly weren't like wow, man. Whew,
I don't notice
good,
it. Personally, I don't notice it, but patients who do notice it, they tell you.
Yeah.
And they notice when it wears off too.
Well, my question is it because maybe their anxiety improves, and perhaps they get better sleep that night, and then their athletic performance improves as a result?
Just more energy.
These are just questions.
More energy, more mental clarity. They function better, and it lasts about 2 to 3 days. And sometimes it does saturate, and they don't see the benefit after that. So
yeah,
it might be a saturation point to it.
Well, that's okay. That's where refining the mechanisms of action gets you out of that gray zone of then you start kind of making things up. And I do this too. You say reserves, or what I hear is that you don't have a solid mechanism of action to apply it to. And that's okay. I mean, there's also not anything clear in the literature where it's going, but there is a study that shows that it certainly isn't increasing the intracellular NAD plus, and the fact that it could be acting as a neurotransmitter and reducing anxiety. Something else is happening, but me and you are not going to know because we don't have a mechanism of action to apply it to. But we do have a mechanism of action to apply it to when it comes to NMN and the salvage pathway. That's clear. And I can tell you, I did NAD plus during the worst of my long hauler chronic fatigue symptoms, and it wasn't the answer. And that's okay. It's not about being right. It's just that's the extent that I understand it.
So have you seen 5-amino 1MQ work in any other case other than yourself?
Yeah. And the person, I've got to get the patient in my mind, because he said his athletic performance did improve. Now, he's also dealing with some mental fatigue and inflammation, and I haven't had a chance to work him up properly. He's kind of a fair weather patient who needed some quick fixes. So I haven't had a chance to address his whole problem. I actually suspect that he actually does have sleep apnea. And I'm gonna, because he always looks exhausted, like he's sleepy. But his athletic, and that's the thing, your athletic, when NAD plus levels actually go up, I'm talking about intracellular, that also triggers turns on the muscle stem cells. Okay, so we do know that there's a correlation between NAD plus and muscle stem cells, and that's why my muscles seemingly, and this was just objective, like it seemed that I came back to myself pretty quickly, like I was regenerating in front of my own eyes, looking at myself in the mirror, and also feeling stronger and feeling more like I've always known myself to feel. And he said his workouts has improved. But again, that's what can happen when you sort of shotgun somebody, or somebody is not ready to get a full workup. So you can really look at the whole picture. I really like getting epigenetic testing, so you can actually see the methylation pathways. And I agree with you. TMG, trimethylglycine, is a piece of the puzzle for methylation. I gave my mother methylfolate with methyl B12 and B6, and she's a retired physician. She didn't understand the methylation pathways, and she's had allergies and toxicities, psoriasis her whole life, and asthma. And her asthma, she could breathe instantly, right away. That was kind of shooting in the dark, but I suspected that something good would happen. That's when you know.
Wow.
You take a vitamin. Yeah, you take a vitamin. You don't expect to suddenly be able to breathe better.
You give her some methylated B vitamins and she breathed better?
Yeah, she stopped having to use her inhaler.
That's wild.
Okay, that's when you know you're on the right track, and that's the beauty of getting better at understanding the mechanisms, because then that's the way it should be. Because if you're really sick and there's a deficit, you got to know, and we're talking about a deficit. It's like folate is at the beginning of the methylation process, and if that cannot get methylated, it's like the rotors of the machine. That first one's like a grandfather clock. That first one, it slows down, and all the other rotors are slow, and then your production of even like glutathione goes down. In fact, if you cannot produce enough glutathione, the homocysteine precursor of glutathione gets released, builds up, and gets released into the bloodstream as homocysteine. And what does homocysteine do? Well, I mean, it causes inflammation. We always measured it in regular medicine, but they sure never told us why it was high to begin with. Well, because
oxidative stress.
Well, yeah, oxidative stress, and their methylation pathway was unable to compensate because there wasn't enough of the MTHFR gene, production, or the production of MF, the mother gene, or the MF, or the mother, gene.
MTHFR gene, yeah.
MTHFR gene in producing. Now I call that like the spray can, the WD-40. You know, greases up the wheels, the rotors.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you need all those B vitamins for the methylation process. You ever wondered like what in the hell B vitamins? Oh, they're good for energy. Yeah, this is because they're required for all those carbon handoffs in the machine.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it, you just end up building up homocysteine and the car starts overheating.
Oh,
I mean,
geez.
it makes sense. I mean, I swear, I want to start up my own like a new medical school. And
Yes,
say
please.
this is where we actually teach you. You know, when you leave this medical school, you're going to actually understand how the body works.
Wow, that'd be cool.
Yeah, but I have a lot to learn still. But you know, look, you got to get some things like solid. That's when you deliver the punch. You know, whatever it's the 5-amino, the methylfolate or the TMG, the trimethylglycine at the right place at the right time, because you know where it's missing. You just need to fill the missing gap, and then the machine starts working. We're a perfect equation.
I'm going to send you this paper that's called Meat Intake and the Dose of Nicotinamide, Causes of Disease, Transition, Health Divides, and Health Futures. I don't know if you've read this one, but if you're interested in NAD, it's one of the most interesting papers I've ever written or I've ever read, because it's basically kind of a history lesson, an agricultural lesson, and an NAD and PARP lesson as well. I think you'll really enjoy this. It's really long, though.
No, look, it doesn't matter if it's long. I've learned how to get through these studies quickly. I'm just scanning, man. I'm looking for the big aha. I'm looking for the pattern.
This one will this one will convince you that red meat is probably the best source of NAD on the planet. And then it'll also convince you of the NAD reserve theory, where diseases are pretty much all diseases are related to like a lack of NAD, and every societal shift, every starvation, every famine, every war has been related to essentially like a lack of NAD, and societal changes and political shifts happen through basically feasts and famines. It's a wild theory.
Man, we must have some similarities, man, because that's what I'm talking about, man. That's profound.
It is.
That's deep. No, I want that one because that's tying, and I'd like to get a better definition, understanding of this NAD plus reserve. And you're the master of food done the way it's supposed to be done, and almost like getting the food right from the farm, and growing up and just having it that understanding and knowing this, and that's why I kept telling myself I'm going to reach out to you and get myself some education. But seriously, I mean, no, seriously, because it was clear that you knew knew what you were talking about, and that's been an area of fogginess for me, is trying to figure out the essence of, for example, organ meats. What a better way to get a multivitamin.
Yeah.
If you get the right one, and that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, I really want to look at that article. I will absolutely read it. And there you go. Now we got another concept, another epiphany coming.
I love it. Well, you report back to me on the next meeting with Halasa and everyone and company.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. This is kind of turning into like a Huberman style interview. I mean, his interviews go on for like 3 hours.
I know.
Should we do another one, or
we'll have to cut it off here and then come up with another topic for next time. Maybe you can give me your thoughts on this article.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, man, we could go through so many of this stuff. I think it's good. We stuck with the concept. you know, 5-amino has its place. I don't have any connection or
Oh, I know.
business, any of that stuff. But we're being truthful with the results. You know, for me, it was life changing. For others, it had its place. For others, it was too much too soon. I think for athletes that are healthy, I think it's I know people before I got onto this that their vertical jump increased like by 6 inches. So there is absolutely solid advantage going on there. But we're honest with our, that the pros and the cons, and so I think when we do that, we're playing the game the way we're supposed to.
I think what we have to do now is we have to try it out, and we have to see which patients respond to this thing. And I don't know if there's a laboratory evaluation or some sort of clinical sign that can tell you when to use it. It may just be trial and error.
Yeah, I'm looking for a lab that I just haven't had the time and energy. There's so much going on, but I really want to see how we can measure NNMT, which is the enzyme that is overexpressed. And by the way, you'll see it's overexpressed in certain cancers. Okay, certain cancers it's overexpressed, and you realize, wait a minute, that there's a continuum with these processes and the shutting down of genes and stuff like that. But again, we don't have to get into it tonight. But yeah, man, I'm good.
All right, good. Next time we'll talk again. Okay.
Awesome, man.
Bye.